It's also the fact that our politicians are completely unaccountable to us. And when I went to Parliament, I remember Nelson Mandela saying to us, the moment you think you are more important than the people who sent you here, the people you represent, the people who pay your salary, is the moment you're of no value to those people. And I happen to believe that.
Yeah.
And that's why I resigned in protest when Thabo Mbeki refused to allow an unfettered investigation into corruption in the arms trade.
This is Burning the Mic on the ACWS network. Welcome in. I'd like you to please like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell right there so you can get the content as we drop it. Ndiyabulela ngoxhaso lwenu on road to 100 subscribers. Yabulela ikyan. Kamako. They say a nation is only as strong as its people. But what happens when the government promises to serve the people, but in return takes more from treasury than they actually return in value? What happens when billions of rands disappear behind palace walls, fancy lifestyles, fancy cars, and empty promises? Welcome to episode 10 of Burning the Mic With Steaze, where we ask today, why does the governance of South Africa cost more than the services that they render? Today I take you on a journey where we dig beneath the surface of the billion-rand cabinet. Under the hood of the expensive engine, unravel the tangled webs of politics, history, corruption that keeps the nation paying more while the streets wait for service delivery. To understand why governance in South Africa costs billions and why so many of these brands seem to vanish before they touch the lives of the general people, we need to look deeper than the numbers. We first need to peer into the very blueprint of the political geography of this country, the provincial borders. These lines on map didn't simply appear. They were carved out of centuries of conquest, segregation, and intense political negotiation. Each border is a scar of history and a battleground of power. Before 1994, South Africa was divided into 4 provinces, namely the Cape, the Natal, the Transvaal, and the Orange Free State. Now, these territories were shaped by colonial conquest and apartheid segregation. If you overlaid that narrative with the Bantustans that apartheid had designed, and these were fragmented homelands which were made to control and divide the black South Africans. Undoing this spatial apartheid was not just about drawing new lines. It was the fierce contest of identity, power, and resources that came along with those discussions. The 1994 provincial demarcations was less about neat maps and more about political survival. Every boundary was negotiated under pressure. Former homeland leaders fought to retain influence. ANC leaders balanced national duty against local identities. The result was a complex provincial system prone to duplication and inefficiency. Later on in the years, communities demanded borders that recognized their ethnic and cultural identities. We found Venda leaders pushing to preserve their homeland's influence. The Tsonga and the Northern Sotho population were seeking representation, and former Bantustan rulers were reluctant to lose their authority. Meanwhile, the ANC navigated a delicate balancing act, integrating former homeland elites and managing political rivalries, while it preserved its own hard-won national unity. The stakes couldn't be higher, because these borders would define who controlled government resources, who wielded political power, and how these services would be delivered to millions. Borders had to be practical enough to govern, sustainable enough to develop, and fair enough to unify a nation long divided. These negotiations finally came to 9 provinces in which we live in the Republic of South Africa today. These were a product of compromise, a patchwork stitched from colonial lines, apartheid fragments, and a new hope. But these borders came with their own burdens. Province came with vast inequalities, as notably today. Some of them struggled with competing ethnic identities. We see uneven economies which struggle to deliver the basic services to their citizens. This is the political geography that sets the stage for a billion-rand governance machine, where power is dispersed, costs are multiplied, and service delivery often falls through the cracks. So how much does the executive branch really cost? According to the 2024-2025 South African National Budget, the cabinet and deputy ministers together cost the taxpayer more than 1.2 billion annually in salaries and allowances. Alongside that, add thousands of political appointees, advisors, and support staff spread across the ministries, and the total wage bill for the executive branch surpasses 4 billion annually. Official residences, government vehicles, travel expenses, and security detail easily add up another 600 million. The operational costs of the ministries, which include infrastructure, administration, and the running expenses, push the total governance expenditure well north of 10 billion annually. Now, to put these numbers into perspective in case they flew over your head, we spend almost double the amount we allocate to basic education on governance overheads. Meanwhile, in 2023, over 20 million South Africans lived below the poverty line, many without reliable access to water, electricity, and decent schooling. These are the words from an esteemed economist in South Africa, Professor Sipho Dlamini. The cabinet wage bill has grown unsustainably. Political office expansions feed patronage networks, inflate government roles, and divert funds from frontline services critical for development. When we look at this, economies of scales has always dictated that big governments will lead to big spending. However, in the South African context, it also has led to a lot of expenditure wastage. Cabinet itself is extremely bloated. Since 1994, the number of ministries and deputy minister positions have ballooned. Each portfolio comes with staff, cars, houses, and perks. Many portfolios overlap and duplicate functions, creating layers of bureaucracy that slow down the decision-making end and waste money. Political patronage is rampant. I mean, people are appointing loyalists instead of experts, swelling the payrolls with non-essential people or ghost employees as well. Many government houses or their buildings stand empty or they're being rented, while millions of South Africans are still living in informal settlements that lack the basic living necessities. So when you look at the numbers and you trace the money, you will notice that one of the reasons why our government has lost a lot of money over the years is because of state corruption, fraud, and misuse of these funds. South Africa's recent history has seen some of the most brazened billion-rand corruption scandals ever recorded. The 2016 to 2019 Zondo Commission of Inquiry into State Capture laid bare the systematic looting of state resources through a nexus of politically connected individuals. The Guptas manipulated government appointments, influenced cabinet decisions, and secured lucrative contracts, diverting billions of rands from public coffers. The Commission's 3,000-plus page report catalogued dozens of illegal contracts, abuses of power, highlighting ministers and senior officials violating the constitutions and the Public Finance Management Act. Former President Jacob Zuma was found to have knowingly enabled state capture, leading to his resignation and ongoing legal battles.
Better known as the Zondo Commission, began on the 21st of August 2018 and lasted until the 15th of June 2022. According to the Democratic Alliance's report on the implementation of the recommendations made by the Zondo Commission, quote, it took over 4 years, 300 witnesses, 3,171 summonses, over 8.6 million pages of documents, and approximately 1 billion rands worth of taxpayer money to implicate over 1,438 people by evidence in the State Capture Commission reports by Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. During these hearings, the South African public was told that Zuma had been planning his coup for more than a decade. His first step, when he assumed power, had been to get rid of the Scorpions. He then used the State Security Agency's funds to pay for several ANC political activities to fight political battles within the ANC so that they ended in his favor. Athol Williams, a former partner in the US-based consulting firm Bain & Company, explained that they'd been hired by Zuma to help restructure the South African Revenue Service's automated systems and impede its ability to investigate organized crime in an attempt to keep tax officials at SARS from picking up on the corruption within the state. Auditing firms like KPMG and PricewaterhouseCoopers were also implicated in state capture, with a partner at KPMG being identified as having turned a blind eye during audits of the Gupta's money farm, Estina, while PwC failed to call out the number of red flags they picked up during an audit of South African Airways finances. The commission also found that the Guptas would move select businessmen and politicians from one state-owned enterprise to the next just long enough for them to ensure that the Guptas were awarded crucial government contracts before they were moved to the next enterprise, leaving these businesses in shambles. Ministers who opposed these appointments or questioned these contracts were subsequently removed from office and were replaced by the Guptas with ministers who were already deep inside their pockets, and the ANC and Zuma's cronies all benefited from the extensive corruption that took place at these SEOs.
From the late 1990s to the early 2000s, South Africa's billion-rand arms procurement revealed deeply rooted corruption that still reverberates today. Estimated loss due to inflated contracts, bribery, and kickbacks exceeded 30 billion rands. Once again, where corruption is, sifumana utata uGedlehlekiswa Zuma. He was implicated for accepting bribes linked to the deal, with charges still under legal scrutiny. We should never forget to mention that several international arms manufacturers admitted corrupt practices during the investigations.
In 2002, the National Prosecuting Authority and the Directorate of Special Operations, aka the Scorpions, reported that Zuma and several other ANC members had been involved in brokering a 30 billion rand arms deal to their benefit. Zuma's financial advisor, Shabir Sheikh, had been heavily involved in the bribery that took place, and he was eventually arrested and sentenced to 15 years in prison. The National Prosecuting Authority wasn't able to successfully indict Zuma on 12 corruption and money laundering charges, but the scandal seemed to follow him wherever he went.
One of the most gruesome examples of state funds being abused for personal gain is evident again in South Africa through one of our former leaders again. In 2014, the Public Protector released a report titled Secure and Comfort. And this report was so detailing and damning that it revealed 246 million rands of taxpayer money spent on unauthorized non-security upgrades, including a swimming pool dubbed the Fire Pool. In 2016, the Constitutional Court ruled that Zuma violated the Constitution by ignoring remedial actions, marking a historic affirmation of constitutional supremacy. This scandal ignited nationwide rage, and it exposed systematic executive abuse.
Yet 206 million rand of taxpayers' money has been used for so-called operational needs and security upgrades for one man at one of his residences. Why? Well, it's all because of risks to President Jacob Zuma's life.
Whether that would be justifiable or not, I would say yes, based on the threat assessment. And in this instance, the threat assessment was such that all the things which have been pointed out here were said to be needed.
To be precise, the security upgrade itself cost 71 million rand. That was for high-tech equipment, bulletproof windows and an underground bunker, to name a few. Government doesn't see any issue with the amount spent.
I'm not sure what apology are we talking about. We are accountable, we're opening up, we're going beyond the normal practice when it comes to the issue of the security.
Bosasa, a private contractor for government facilities, bribed officials to secure billions in contracts. Testimony before the Zondo Commission described over 200 million being paid in bribes to politicians and civil servants. It is alleged that the company influenced policy decisions and it inflated their contract costs, worsening the service delivery while they were making sure that their pockets got fatter. Now, what took a turn for the worst was the CEO, Gavin Watson, dying under mysterious circumstances in 2019 during the ongoing investigations. It is believed that he pulled a Thabo Bester before Thabo Bester.
The COO of Bosasa told the commission how they'd pay millions in bribes to prominent ANC ministers in exchange for government contracts, and even showed a video of him placing 1 million rand cash in a bag, something that was a monthly occurrence.
We're changing things, we're not going to do bribes anymore and all that type of thing. And then I found out that he was trying to buy calves for Jacob Zuma. You know, him and a chap by the name of Louis Pisano. That had got a criminal record that I didn't know about. And, you know, Louis Pisano and Gavin Watson tried to corrupt, or he was corrupt already, but get Jacob Zuma on their side, which explains why Gavin could go down to Nkandla and command the president to do things for him.
The angle at which the vehicle struck the concrete pillar and the approach of the vehicle It certainly seems as if there's no evidence of any attempt to avoid the collision from occurring, no tire marks, no brake marks. And it, from all reports, it looks like the vehicle was deliberately steered into the pillar of the bridge.
In 2022, the Auditor-General revealed a report that also showed irregular expenditure topping 50 billion. Much of this was linked to poor buying practices and corruption. Another heartbreaking statistic would be that in South Africa, over 45% of our government departments fail to comply with the Financial Management Act. There has been a pattern of repeated audit disclaimers, highlighting systematic failure to safeguard public funds.
Now, the Auditor-General of South Africa has painted a very bleak picture to Parliament of the financial situation of state-owned entities in the country. Now, the AG presented the outcomes of the 2019-2020 financial year yesterday, and the Financial Committee on Public Accounts, or SCOPA, was briefed by the AG on the Development Bank of Southern Africa, or DBSA, the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa, PRASA, Denel, Eskom and the SABC, as well as Transnet. Now, the AG indicated all entities are regressing rather than improving, and that there's a sharp increase in irregular, fruitless and wasteful expenditure at some of these or most of the SOEs. And there was no audit for South African Airways, as that entity is still under business rescue. So SCOPA says it views the regression in these audit outcomes in a very serious light.
Despite the billions wasted, millions wait. Education struggles with overcrowded classrooms, unpaid teachers, and learners without textbooks run ragged through the country. Every year we hear of, either in the Northern Cape or the Eastern Cape, Mpumalanga nase KZN, even nase Kapa, in the metro cities, as they say, of kids lacking learning material. Yet we have billions and billions of rand going down the drain to corruption annually. Clinics lack essential medication and staff. This leads to preventable deaths. And you think it's a joke until you go to a public hospital and you sit and you listen to the people bemoan our system. It's no longer at the top. It's right through the whole structure and the system. It is rotten. It is non-existent. Not to speak about our communities, which are riddled with infrastructure faults. If it's not power outages, it's potholed roads. If not that, we are speaking of water shortages, if not sewage being around our streets. The South African police services, I believe also we should pay some sympathy to them. They are very strict amid the soaring crime. South Africa is seeing the highest levels of crime. Accountability in South Africa really exists on paper. There's Parliament, there's the Auditor-General, there's the Public Protector, but enforcement struggles against public interference. And we've seen this in everyday life and in most recently, the political killings in South Africa. Regardless of how many irregularities are exposed, enforcement hardly ever happens or it is hampered. Political will is key to meaningful change. And when the politics are crooked, when the politicians are about their own causes, the system will never have meaningful effect.
We should have started with the early childhood development 30 years ago. And if there is any mistake that we have made as a nation, as a government, it is this one. That 30 years ago, we were blindsided, and we should have realized that to get this country to be put on a much higher plane of development, we should have started with early childhood development then.
Despite last year celebrating the highest matric pass rate since the start of democracy, the country remains in crisis when it comes to early education. More than 80% of grade 4 pupils cannot read for meaning, as revealed in a 2021 report.
First is the issue of service delivery. Obviously, we understand that there should be a provision of a healthcare service that is effective. That's the first thing, but it must be safe. It must be of high quality. We must ensure equitable access, and also it must be affordable. And I must just say to you, Shaba, that none of the two systems are providing this, the public sector and the private sector. And the other pillar that you need to look at is the health workforce. Talking to healthcare workers. One, they must be well trained. Secondly, they must be motivated. But the issue of numbers come into play as well. We must have adequate staffing of a healthcare system. Then you come up with the what you call health information system. You understand that we must do monitoring of outcomes. There must be planning of interventions, and also obviously make informed decisions. The issues of access to essential medicines. You know that we're currently grappling with the numbers. Medicines are out of stock. There's also should be an issue of technology involved in that. Then the two last ones are the leadership and governance. This is a major hurdle, Masichaba, that we're facing as a country, as you've heard from the report of the health ombuds. In fact, the two reports from the health ombuds talking about this issue of ethical leadership and governance. The last one that we're talking about is the issue of health financing, health system financing, where in South Africa we have chosen the National Health Insurance. I must say that, Masichaba, that we must learn to differentiate between the universal health coverage and the NHI. The universal health coverage is where we want to be. The country, the world wants to be there. But how we get there depends on the country, whether they want to use a donkey, a horse, a plane, or they want to use a car or water transport. But it is the how part that we're talking about. And everybody in South Africa, they agree, the conversation that we're having is not about not wanting the universal health coverage. We are talking about how we're getting there. We don't agree on how we're getting there in terms of the NHI.
The billion-rand cabinet is more than just budgeting lines. It reflects our country, its history, how we are wrestling with the past, how we are burdened with political compromise, and we are challenged to deliver justice in governments. The rands are lost to waste, and the corruption is not just petty or small numbers. They are lost opportunities, broken dreams, and these are our lives that are going to waste. The streets are watching. The time for change is now. Next year is the year. Let's take our fight to the ballots. I have been Black Steaze, and this has been Burning the Mic for ACWS. Aluta continua.